Okay. So in our last session, we have discussed this builder design pattern, fluent interface, prototype, shallow copy, and a deep copy. In the first session, we have discussed this creational design pattern, factory method. Today, I'm going to discuss this thing, and tomorrow I'm going to discuss this thing. With that, our creational design pattern will be completed. What we are going to discuss today? Today, we are going to discuss what is singleton design pattern, why singleton class is a set. We'll see singleton design pattern without thread shape. What is the problem we are facing in a multi-threaded environment if our singleton design pattern is not implemented as a thread shape? Then we'll see how we can implement the singleton design pattern thread shape using lock and a double check locking mechanism. Then we will see what is lazy loading and eager loading in singleton design pattern. Then we will see how we can implement lazy loading using lazy of a T generic class, which will provide thread shape in a multi-threaded environment. Then we will see what is singleton versus static class. In C#, it is one of the important real-time, or you can say it is one of the important interview question. Then we will see two real-time examples, right? One example, as people are demanding, sir, please explain the concept using web application. So today I'm going to explain this concept, right? Exception logging using real-time application. So how you can implement exception logging in your MPC application, that are what I'm going to show you. And then I will show you another real-time example, that is caching, how you can implement caching using singleton design pattern. So these concepts we are going to be discussed today, and it is very, very important from development point of view as well as from interview perspective,
Very, very,
right? So let us start today's session. So let's start discussing with the singleton design pattern. What is singleton design pattern? Let us first see the definition. We need to use singleton design pattern in C# when we need to ensure only one instance of a class is going to be created and then provide simple global access to that instance for entire application. For example, suppose, so what is exactly the singleton design pattern? The singleton design pattern says that if you want to create only one instance of a particular class and you want to share that one instance to different clients. So in this case, this is my singleton class. And this client want to use the singleton object. This client B also want to use the singleton class object. Client C is also want to use the singleton class object. Use the singleton class object means they want to consume these methods, right? Then what is the singleton design pattern says that don't create a different object for a different client. Create only one object, give some mechanism so that that one object will be shared to these multiple clients, and then those clients are going to use that single instance of the singleton class to consume the different methods. That means in singleton design pattern, only one instance of the class is going to be available for all the different clients who wants to consume the member of the singleton class. So how we are going to implement these things, right? So if you want to implement the singleton design pattern, then you need to follow some guideline, right? Or you can say you need to follow some rules. What are the rules? First of all, you need to declare the constructor of the singleton class as private and parameterless. So in this case, if this is the singleton class, then the constructor of this class should be private, should be parameterless. Why we are making this constructor as private? Because we don't want that class to be instantiated from outside the class. If your class contains only one constructor and that is to a private parameterless constructor, then no other classes, right? From outside the class, you cannot create an instance. So you want to restrict the instance creation from outside the class. This is the reason why you need to mark the constructor as private and a parameterless. This is the first rule. Second rule is that you need to mark the class as self. So if whenever you create a class and you don't want that class to be act as a parent class, that means you want to restrict further inheritance, then you need to use then you need to mark the class as a self. So once you mark the class as a self, that means this class cannot be used in further inheritance. Further inheritance in the sense this class cannot be act as a parent class anymore, right? That class can be act as a child class. That class can have some parent classes or interfaces, but that singleton class will not be act as a parent class. That means from there, no further derived classes is possible. Then we need to create a private static variable. So what is this private static variable? It is going to hold the singleton instance. So this is the singleton class. So you need to create a variable. That variable is going to be private. That variable is going to be static. And that private static is variable is going to hold the instance of the singleton class. But how that instance you are going to return to the client, for that purpose, you need to create a public static property or method, right? You need to create a public static property or method, and that public static property or method, as it's a static method, by using this class name, you can call this property or method. And what are the things you will do inside this method or property? As part of this method or property, you need to create a singleton instance. You have created a static variable. You have to initialize that variable with the singleton instance, and then you need to return that instance. But before initializing, you need to check whether the instance is this is a static variable. Static means it's a global variable. Then you need to check whether this variable is initialized or not. If it is initialized, then don't initialize again, return that single instance. If not initialized, then first initialize and then return that instance to the client. And once the client called this property or method, then he will get the singleton instance and then start consuming the member of the class, right? If this is not clear at the moment, once we start discussing the practical example, then I will again explain these 4 points what I have discussed here, right? Then how to implement singleton design pattern? See, there are many ways you can implement singleton design pattern. What are the ways? Now, first of all, without thread shape, you can implement the singleton design pattern. We'll see all these examples. Then we'll see what is the problem if the singleton class is not thread shape. Then we will see how we can implement a thread shape, how to implement our singleton class as a thread shape by using the lock mechanism, by using the double check locking mechanism, by using the lazy of T generic class. And then we will see what is the difference between eager loading and lazy loading. So that is also what we are going to discuss. So these are the ways we will discuss uh, of implementing the singleton design pattern. So let us start discussing the singleton design pattern. Let us first discuss the no thread shape singleton design pattern, right? So for that purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new project. Okay, so let me give that project as singleton demo into my existing solution. Sorry. So here you need to create a console application singleton demo and create the click on the OK button, right? Then make this project as start, right? Then what do we need to do? Then create a class file with the name singleton v1. So you can create singleton. I'm making this class file as singleton v1 because I'm going to create a different version of this class. So this is singleton v1, and as part of this code, I'm going to copy paste this thing, right? Same. So first of all, okay, let us compare these 4 points. We need to declare a constructor that should be private and parameterless. Okay, so you can see this is my private and parameterless constructor. What is the code that I will explain again? So first of all, let's see what are the things we require. Those are implemented or not. This is the private constructor and this is parameterless. Second thing, the class should be declared as self. You can see the class is declared as self. You might have one question, sir, why we are making the class as self? We are making this class constructor as private so that no classes can inherit because this constructor is not available. The inheritance is not possible. We cannot create a derived classes of the singleton class. Then why you are still making this class as self? That is what we are also going to discuss. Then the third point is we need to create a private static variable. Okay, let's see. This is the private static variable. And you can see initially I'm initializing this instance with null value. And this is the variable which is going to hold the singleton instance. The fourth point is we need to create a public static property or method which is going to return the singleton instance. You can see get instance. This is the public static method. And if you check what we are going, so this method return type is singleton. That means this method is going to return the singleton instance. So These are the four things that what required and we have done with our class implementation. Now let us discuss. So what I'm doing, I'm creating a private static integer variable. What is the use of this integer variable? Now to see why, what is our intention? Our intention is to create the singleton class. What is the meaning of singleton class? Means we want that class to be instantiated only once. So and we know whenever we create an instance of a class, the class constructor is going to be executed. If we create two instances, if we create five instances, then what will happen? If we create two instances, then two times the constructor is going to be executed. This is the basic OOPS concept, right? If we create five instance of the class, then that means five times the class constructor is going to be executed. But according to singleton design pattern, only one instance should be created, no more times, right? So for that purpose we are creating this counter variable, and within the constructor, right, within the constructor of this class we are incrementing the counter variable. If the counter variable value is 1, that means only one instance is created. If this counter variable value increment to 2, means two times this class is executed, two times the constructor is executed. If the variable value is 5, means five times the constructor is executed. That means at any point of time, even we call this get instance method multiple times, right? Then it should not be increment this value beyond 1. If it is incremented beyond 1, means we are able to create multiple instances. So this is the use of this variable, and this variable will give us the guarantee that the singleton instance is going to be created only one time. Then this class is marked as a shield, means this class cannot be used in inheritance, right? Inheritance means this class can be act as a child class, but no further child class or a derived class can be created from this singleton class. What is the use of this get instance method? As we discussed, this get instance method is a static method. So by using the class name, and we can call this method, and actually whenever from any client they want the instance of the singleton class, they have to call this get instance method by using the class. And when they call, they will get the singleton instance, right? But before, if you check, so what we are doing, we are checking whether this instance variable is null or not. If it is null, then we are creating an instance, and if it is not null, we are simply returning the instance, right? First time you are calling this get instance method, it will check this condition. This condition will be true, so it will create the instance. Second time you are calling the instance static variable. Static variables means what? They are common for every object, right? No matter how many objects you created, but they are going to be available. So second time you are calling the static method, then he will check the static instance variable. Yes, this is already initialized. No need to initialize anymore. Return that instance, right? But for the first time when you are executing this condition, right? For the first time when this condition is true, while creating the instance, the constructor is going to be executed, and it will increment the counter value to 1, and that value is 1 is going to be displayed here. Now the client wants the singleton instance, then they have to call this get instance method on the singleton class, right? And once they call, they will get the instance of which class? Singleton class. Once they got the singleton class instance, they can call this print details method, and whatever message they want to print, they just need to pass the message, and that message is going to be displayed here. So this is how the singleton class is implemented. But guys, this is not a thread set. Why it is not thread set? I will show you. I'll show you practical that this implementation, this V1, or you can say this is the version 1 implementation. This is not thread set, right? So once you implement the singleton design pattern, next what you need to do, you need to consume the singleton design pattern from different client, right? And in our example, the main method of the program class is the client. Let's assume that this is client 1 and this is client 2. The client 1 calling the get instance method to get the singleton instance, and then they have to consume the method which is defined inside the singleton class. This is client 2. The client also called the get instance method. He also got the singleton instance, and he also consumed the print details method. As we are calling this get instance method two times, then that means two times means the object is not going to be created two times. The singleton instance is not going to be created two times, only one time. And when we call the get instance method for the first time, from the second time onwards, the instance is already initialized, that initialized instance is going to be returned to the client, right? And how we will prove this? We'll prove this if the counter value is 1, means only one time the instance is created. If the counter value is 2, means 2 times the singleton instance is created, right? So let me run the application and show you the output. The application is loading. Yes, it is written. Okay, so you can see the counter value is 1. What it means? It means the constructor of the singleton class is executed only 1. So this also proves that whatever implementation we have provided, that is working fine. The singleton instance is created only once, and that instance is going to be shared to different client. So this is singleton design pattern, but this implementation is not thread safe. What it means? In a multi-threaded environment, it is also possible that we will end up with creating multiple instances of the singleton class. So this is a single-threaded application. So for single-threaded application, this is working fine. But this will not be going to work in a multi-threaded application. That's what we are going to discuss next. But for now, just tell me any code, any question from anyone, how we implement, what are the things we need to follow while implementing the singleton design pattern. Guys, any question from anyone? As why you guys are silent, I don't know.
No questions, sir.
Okay. Okay. So the second thing what we are going to discuss, why singleton class is still. See, generally this is one of the frequently asked interview question. The interviewer will ask you this question. We have the private constructor, which will restrict the class inheritance. Then why you make this class as self? For example, if I'm creating a public class derived singleton, right? Then I cannot make this class inherited. I cannot do something like this. This is not possible, right? Why?
So
Because
sealed class is mandatory, or we can put any other class too.
that is what I'm going to explain now. Why it is mandatory?
Oh,
You should mark this class as singleton, right? But the interviewer will ask you this question in a different manner, right? He will ask this. So this is the private constructor, and this private constructor is restricted the class inheritance. That means you cannot create a new derived classes from the singleton class as the constructor is private. Then why you mark this class as self? This is the question which you might get in the interview, right? See, in this case, we are getting the compilation error. Yes, it is absolutely type, right? So you can see cannot derive from sealed type singleton, right? So now he will ask you, yeah, I can remove this sealed keyword. And if I again compile the application, then again still I'm getting this error is inaccessible due to protection level, right? That is what absolutely fine. It is working fine. Then why I mark this class as a single sealed? Right? See, in this case, you are not getting the issue. In this case, you are not getting the error. That is absolutely fine. But do one thing, cut this one, paste it inside this class, and see whether this error is occurring or not. Now we are getting any error, guys.
No error.
So,
no.
so the
Yeah.
point that you need to remember, the main objective of constructor is what? Constructor objective is not inheritance. Constructor object is to create the instance, right? This private constructor will restrict the class to be instantiated from outside the class, but it doesn't restrict the class inheritance. In this case, once I move this derived singleton class within the singleton class, that means now it becomes a nested class. A class within another class is called as a nested class, and in this case, this is not restricted. This is not restricted means what? Now the inheritance is possible. Now inheritance is possible means now you can also create an instance of singleton derived class. What is the name? Derived singleton. Okay. Now you can create the instance of a derived singleton, right? Then you can create new derived singleton. Right? You can create a derived singleton instance. Then you can call the print details method. This is possible. This is possible or not by passing some message. This is possible or not? So you are able to create the instance. So now run the application and see how many times the constructor is executed. The counter value is what? The counter value is 2. That means how many times the constructor is executed now? Can anybody tell
2
me?
times.
2 times. That means
2 times.
2 times. That if the constructor is executed 2 times, that means what? It is a single instance or we are able to create multiple instances.
Means
Multiple.
multiple.
Instances. That means does this private constructor restrict inheritance?
No.
No. That means what? The private constructor is only used to restrict the object instantiation from outside the class. It doesn't restrict class inheritance, right? But now do one thing, mark this class as self. Do one thing, mark this class as self. So self. So once we mark this class as self, see what happened. Now we are getting the error or not? Now we are getting the compilation error or not? Yes, we are getting the compilation
Yes.
error.
Yes.
What is saying cannot derive from the sealed type singleton, right? So now the inheritance is not possible. You cannot derive from a sealed class. So if someone asks you why we are using this sealed type, even if this private constructor is there which will restrict, then you can simply say, sir, private constructor is not to restrict inheritance. The job of a private constructor is to restrict the class instantiation from outside the class. And the job of a sealed keyword is to restrict inheritance, further inheritance, right? And if, for example, if we do not mark the class as a sealed, right, then if we create a nested classes, then we can create nested child classes, right? In this case, this derived singleton class is inherited from the singleton class. This is possible. But if we still don't want that nested child classes, then what we can do? We can mark the class as a sealed, which will restrict the inheritance, right? So the job of private constructor is to restrict the class to be instantiated from outside the class, and the job of a sealed keyword to mark the class as a sealed so that that class cannot take part further in inheritance. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right? So this is the things that you need to say, right? Why singleton class is a sealed, right? So in nested class we have discussed these things. Yeah, we cannot derive once we mark the class as a sealed. So this is the thing that we need to understand. The next thing what we are going to discuss, that thread shape, how our implementation is not a thread shape, right? So the way we have implemented our code, right? The way we have implemented our singleton class code, it is not a thread set, right? Let me remove these things. Okay, we are already in the P1 version. See, the way we have implemented our code, it is not a thread set. What it means? It means in a single environment like this, it is working fine. Now we are getting the output as expected because we are running the application using a single environment. But once we run this application in a multi-threaded environment, then we will not get the expected output. In multi-threaded environment, we might be end up creating multiple object of the singleton class. Let us prove these things, right? So you guys already know parallel programming, right? So parallel programming, there is a method called parallel.info, right? So you know this thing. We have already discussed this parallel programming, and in this case, print teacher details. Right, so you can create two methods, right? So you can see this is my client one, right? Say this is client one and this is client two, right? I mean, I am two different methods and I want to execute these two methods parallelly. Say if I want to execute these two methods parallelly, then I can make use of parallel.invoke method. So in parallel programming, we have already discussed there are three methods. One is parallel.forloop, parallel.foreach loop, and parallel.invoke. Parallel for loop and for each loop is for executing the loop, right? If you are having a very big loop and you want to execute by using multiple threads, then you can make use of parallel for loop or parallel for each loop as per your requirement. But if you are having multiple methods and you want to execute those methods parallelly by using different threads, then you can make use of a parallel.invoke method. So here I'm calling the print teachers details method. I'm calling the print student details method. So in this case, what will happen? This method will be executed by one thread, and this method is going to be executed by a different thread. Let's assume that this method is executed by thread one, then this method is going to be executed by thread. That means what will happen in this case? So both threads are going to be executed simultaneously, or you can say parallelly. So if both threads are going to execute parallelly, then this get instance method is going to be executed parallelly. Then both thread will come here and both thread will found that this instance equals to null, right? And for both thread, this condition is going to be true. If for both thread, this condition is going to be true, that means this body is going to be executed for both thread. And if this body is going to be executed for both thread, then how many instances is going to be created? One instance or two instances? Guys?
Two.
Instances.
That means in a multi-threaded environment, we might end up creating multiple instances if our singleton class is not a thread set. Let us run this application and see whether we are able to create it is creating two different threads or not, right? So we are executing, we are getting this value one. So for now, we are not getting two threads. Run few times, again run the application. At some point of time, see, now it is creating two different threads, right? So we might end up creating multiple threads in a multi-threaded environment if our singleton class is not a thread set, right? And the way we have implemented, this is not a thread set. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right? Then what is our next target? So the next target is how we can make the singleton class as thread safe, right? So that in a multi-threaded environment also, it is going to create a single object, right? So for that purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm creating a separate class file and I'm giving the class name as singleton v2.cs, right? So to work everything as expected, what I'm going to do, I'm just commenting these things. Right? This is my version 1. So the work of version was is done. So let's comment this one, right? Right. So before that, I just need to tell you a few things how we can implement thread safe singleton design pattern. Right. So there are many ways we can implement thread safe singleton design pattern. What are the ways? One way is we can use lock mechanism. Another way is for better performance, to improve the application performance, you can use double check locking mechanism. Another option is you can use eager loading. Another option is you can use lazy-ft generic class. So there are 4 ways that we can use to provide thread safe to our singleton class. Let us discuss all these approaches one by one. So let's start discussing this lock mechanism. So guys, remember this lock mechanism, this double check locking mechanism, right? And or this lazy-ft, these 3 mechanism uses lazy loading, and this mechanism, right, eager loading is nothing but eager loading, right? So we'll discuss separately what is lazy loading and what is eager loading in detail, right? So let's start discussing this singleton design, how we can make our singleton design pattern. thread shape using the lock, right? So if you guys remember how to provide thread shape using lock in multi-threading, we have already discussed the same concept here we need to use. So first of all, you need to create one object, right? Here I'm giving that object name as instance lock. So, and then what we need to do, you just need to call this lock object and a lock keyword, and the constructor you need to pass this, and whatever the critical section code that you need to write inside the lock. So this is the multi-threading concept, right? As I told you, if you want to understand the design pattern, OOPS concept, multi-threading, collection framework, exception handling. If you know these things, parallel programming. If you know these 5 things, design patterns is just like simple things for you, right? So what I'm doing here, I'm creating one object of type, you can say this is the object of a type object. Object is the superclass, right? You can create any type of object, but for simplicity, I'm creating object type object, right? So once you create this instance lock variable, then you need to use the lock keyword, and to this lock keyword, you need to pass this variable. That's it. So this is nothing but here critical section start. This is nothing but here critical section end. So, and within this critical section, within this lock object, we are checking this condition. If instance equals to null, then create the object, right? And then you need to return the object. With this implementation, what will happen? Now, when one thread will come into the picture, then the thread will check whether any other thread acquire an exclusive lock on this lock object or not. If one thread accessing, no. If one thread entering into the critical section, then no other thread will enter into the critical section. One thread will come, he will check, is there any thread acquired a lock on this instance lock object? No thread acquired. Okay, then let me acquire a lock on this object. Once the thread acquired a lock and then that thread will enter into the critical section. And once a thread acquire a lock on the lock object, then no other thread can acquire a lock until and unless the thread which acquired the lock is released the lock, right? That means one thread entered the critical section. As long as that thread executing, or as long as that thread inside the critical section, no other thread can enter into the critical section. These things we have already discussed, right? And once the thread complete the critical section execution, then he will come out from this block, from this body. And once the thread come out, then other threads who are there in the queue from other threads, only one thread can again enter into the critical section. That means what? Now, with this implementation, at any given point of time, only one thread can enter into the critical section, right? So with these changes, right, rest everything is same, right? We just need to create one object and we just need to use the lock, right? With these changes, so what will happen now? When two threads, right? Now you can see this is thread 1, this is thread 2. So trying to access the this get instance method. Let's assume first thread 1 will come into the picture, right? Then the thread 1 will make an instance lock. The thread 1 will acquire a lock on this lock object. Then thread 2 also again come into the same place. But for thread 2, it will not acquire a lock. Why? Because already this instance lock object is locked by thread 1. Until and unless thread 1 not release this instance lock, then thread 2 cannot acquire a lock. Then thread 1 start executing, checking this instance variable. Yes, it is null. So let me create an instance. Once the instance creation completed, then that critical section, then it will come out from the critical section and it will release the lock. As soon as it release the lock, thread 2 will acquire a lock on this instance lock object. And then when thread 2 comes here, then he will find that instance lock is not null. It is already initialized. So he will not execute this code and he will simply return this instance. So with this implementation, right, only one thread will enter inside the critical section and only one thread will able to execute this piece of code. No two threads can check this instance equals to null condition at any given point of time. Only one thread will be able to check this condition. And if he found this value is null, then only he is going to create the instance. Otherwise, you will simply return the instance, right? So this is how you will provide thread set, right? So now let me run this application and show you whether two threads are going to be created or not. I will execute this application multiple times because to make sure that only one thread is going to be created. Sorry, one instance is going to be created. I execute for the first time, counter value is 1, means one time the constructor executed. Second time I'm executing, still the value is 1, means what? One time the constructor is executing. I'm executing another time. So the counter value is still showing me 1, means what? So now, no matter how many threads are trying to access this get instance value method at the same time, but only one thread will acquire a lock on this lock object, which will ensure that only one instance of the singleton class is going to be created, and further that created instance is going to be shared by this get instance method to different clients. Clear, guys, how to provide thread safety? Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Right? But but there is also a problem. What is the problem? See, if thread 1 acquiring a log, that is fine. Once the thread 1 created the instance, still the thread 1 not completed, still the thread 1 not released the log, thread 2 cannot return this instance. That means the thread 2, suppose first time the instance is created, second time, why they have to wait to check this condition? Is that required? Because the instance is created, then why I'm waiting for the other thread to release the lock? Trying to observe my point, right? First time it is fine, you need to log and you need to create the instance. But from second time onward, does it require to wait for the thread to release the lock? If the instance is created, simply I need to return the instance. Why I'm going to log these things? Right? That means what? And that means we need to find a better approach to improve the performance. And for that, we need to use this is locking mechanism, right? Locking mechanism. And the other option that what we are going to discuss now is double check locking mechanism, right? So let me add a class file singleton p3.cs, right? Let me copy this code. Control C. Let comment this one. The use of this version 2 is done, right? So we need to find a better approach. What is the better approach? See, first we need to check this one. If instance equals to null, then only log the resource. If instance equals to null, then only log the resource. Otherwise, if instance is not null, simply return the instance. So thread 1 will come. Thread 1 will come. Thread 1 find that instance equals to null. You have to come in, he has to acquire a lock on this lock object. Thread 2 will also come. Thread 2 will also find that instance equals to null. So he has to wait. But once the thread 1 execution is completed, the instance is created. Once the instance is created, then he released the lock, and the thread 2 who is waiting for the lock, he is going to check and he will also. But from the thread 3, thread 4, thread 5, whenever they come, right, they will check this condition. This condition is null. This condition is false. False means already the instance is created. Simply return the instance. No need to wait till the lock is released, right? So in this way, right, you will get better performance as compared to this lock mechanism. So always double check locking mechanism will give you better performance as compared to locking mechanism, right? So this is how you need to write the code using the double check locking mechanism, which not only provide thread safety, but that will also give you better performance as compared to simply lock mechanism. See, the counter value is 1. Again, I'm running the application. Again, you will get the counter value as 1. Again, I'm running the application. Again, you will get the counter value as 1. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
So which approach is good? V1 or V2 or V3?
V3.
V3.
Right? So V3 not only give you better performance. See, V1 is going to give you better performance, but the thing is that it is not thread safe. V2 is going to be thread safe, but it will not give you better performance. V3, It is simply giving you better performance with thread shape in a multi-threaded environment. So the next thing what we are going to discuss is, right, eager loading and lazy loading, right? So eager loading and lazy loading. So this is one of the important concept, right? While working with the Singleton design pattern, you might get some question related to this. What is the difference between eager loading and lazy loading of Singleton design pattern in C#, right? So simply speaking, right, eager means early, lazy means later, right? Eager means early, lazy means later. Eager means what? Okay. Create the object at the startup and create the object at startup and make it ready to be used in future. And what is lazy? Lazy means later, or you can say on demand, right? On demand. On demand means when required, then create. When required, then create. Right? Give me 1 minute, guys. Right? So eager loading means at the startup only, you need to create the instance and make it ready so that whenever the client request comes, return that created instance. Lazy means whenever the request comes for the first time, then only I need to create the instance. So guys, you just tell me, we have already discussed 3 examples: Singleton V1, Singleton V2, Singleton V3. So in these 3 example, which approach we are following? Which approach we are following? When the instance is going to be created?
We're doing eager loading, early loading.
Eager loading.
Eager loading means whenever we access the get instance method for the first time, that is when we demand the instance, then only the instance is going to be created. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is nothing but your eager loading. Eager loading means you need to load the, this is lazy loading. Lazy loading means whenever you demand the instance, then only it is going to create the instance and return the instance, right? So this is nothing but your lazy loading. And how to implement eager loading? Let me create another version of this class. Singleton version 4.cs, right? Let me copy paste this code. Right? So what I need to do, okay, let me comment this one so that the compilation error will be gone, right? So what we need to do is, instead of this, what I need to do, new singleton, right? And here you do not need to check anything, simply return the instance. So now you just tell me, it is going to be created at the class startup, or it is going to be created when you call the get instance method?
When the class starts.
Startup, because it's a class, and as we know, whenever we are having a static class or static member of a class, then when the class is loaded, at that time the static members are going to be created, right? And it's a static member, right? It is not a non-static member that is going to be created when right? It's a static member. Static member means this variable is going to be created at the time of class startup. And once the class at the this is the static member which is going to be created at the time of class startup, right? And once this variable is created, right, then you can simply return that instance. There is no chance that this statement is going to be executed for 2 times. It's a variable and it's a static variable, and we know static variables are going to be created only once during their life cycle, right? And we are just simply returning that instance. So in this case, this will use the eager loading. And in the case of eager loading, we do not have the thread safety issue, right? The CLR will take care of everything. CLR will take care how to initialize this instance, when to initialize this instance, how we can how to handle the threads issue in a multi-threaded environment. Everything will be taken care by the CLR. In this case, we just need to initialize at the time of declaring the variable and then simply return that variable. This is nothing but your eager loading. And in the case of eager loading, load the object as soon as possible, make it ready, right? And whenever the client want, then return that instance. Now the client want the instance, the client will call this method. I'm not going to create the instance now. The instance is already created. I just need to return that instance. So in this case, there is no chance that you will get that issue threads in this version of Singleton Design Pattern, right? So now if you run the application, then still you will get the same output, that is threads, right? But the thing is that thread shape, right? You can see. So if you want a good performance, then eager loading is not good. Eager loading means if you are loading, if you are creating the instance at the time of startup, then it will take more time to beginning the application, right? So always I generally prefer to use the on demand whenever the required, then only create the instance, which will ultimately not taking it will not it will ultimately it will not take more time to start the application, right? If you are having more number of static classes, more number of static variable, then the starting of the application is going to be going to take some time, right? So I always prefer to use lazy loading, right? So I generally prefer to use this V3 version, right, which will not only improve the performance but also thread shape. And if you want eager loading, then it is also fine. But in the again, it is up to you which approach you need to follow, right? This is the eager loading and this is the lazy loading, right? So this is the difference. So if someone asks you what is the difference between them, then you need to tell eager loading means we need to create and make the object ready as soon as the class startup, and we need to return the instance whenever the client want. And in the case of lazy loading means whenever the client demand, then only we need to create the instance and return the instance when, right? That means at the first time, whenever the client makes a request to get for the singleton instance, for the first request, we need to initialize the singleton instance, or you can say we need to create the instance and return the instance. But in the case of eager loading, from the beginning only, we need to create and make it ready to be used by the client. This is the difference between eager loading and lazy loading, right? Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right. But from .NET Framework 4.0, right? But from .NET Framework 4.0, to make your work simple, right? If you do not have this kind of flexibility, right? Let me copy this version, right? Let me uncomment this one. Right? Let me uncomment this one, right? So in this case, you can see I have to create the static unlock object, right? I have to check the null value, then I have to use the lock mechanism, right? Double check locking mechanism to provide thread shape, right? But this can be simply overcome by using the lazy generic class, which is provided in .NET Framework 4.0. With the lazy generic class, now you do not need to do all these things, right? So what simply you need to create? So, okay, let me first create a different class, right? Singleton version 5. This is the last singleton version class that we are going to create, right? So singleton v5.cs. So in this case, we want to implement lazy loading, but we don't want that double check locking mechanism, because I'm not that good at handling all these things, creating instance variable and all those things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use, right? What I'm going to do, I'm going to use another approach of making the class lazy loading, making the singleton instance lazy loading. What is the things that you need to do? Okay. So let me create a variable. You need to use the lazy keyword to the constructor of the lazy keyword, lazy generic type, right? If you go to the definition, then you will see that it's a generic class, which is introduced in .NET Framework. Which version it is showing? 4.0.0.0, right? From .NET Framework 4.0, this lazy class is introduced. So lazy, okay, instance, then what you need to do, let me comment this variable, then equals to new, and you have to use this lazy singleton, and to the constructor using the lambda expression, right? You need to provide the constructor. So what is the object you want to create? I want to create the singleton instance object, right? And then what you need to do, simply call the, right, return instance dot value property. That's it. So in this case, we are making this instance. So now this is not required, right? This is not required. This is also not required. Let me remove the unwanted things, right? So now what we are doing, public static, you can also, if you want, then you can also make this as a read only. That is also fine, right? So now what we are doing, we are using the lazy of T type, right? T type means here T is nothing but what type of instance you want to create. I want to create the instance of singleton. You have to specify T. And you know how to create the constructor. This is the lazy of a singleton, new lazy of a singleton. To the constructor of this lazy of a T, you need to provide the actual object what you want to return using the lambda expression. Here I'm providing, I want to return the new singleton instance from this. And how you are accessing, you need to access by using the value property, right? So if you go, then you will see that what exactly this is returning gets the lazily initialized value of the current system.lazy of one instance, right? What instance you have lazily initialized, you want to return that value, then you need to call the value property. Simply that's it. So with this change, now this lazy of T class will take care everything. This class will take care how the instance is going to be created. And but remember, this instance is going to be created lazily. Lazily in the sense, whenever you record, whenever you call this get instance method for the first time, then only it is going to access the value, right, and return the value. So you can simply remove this static. No, you have to remember use the static because we are accessing within the static block, right? So now, give me 1 minute. So with these changes, what will happen? Now the CLR will take care of everything. CLR will initialize the, create the constructor, execute the constructor, create the singleton instance, right? And that instance is going to be created only once. And that instance, that is true. It is also going to handle the multi-threading issue, right? In the multi-threaded environment also, this is not going to be created multiple times, right? So let me run the application and show you the things, right? The same code I'm going to execute, and you can see still it is going to create only one instance. And this time the singleton 5 version, right? It is uses lazy loading of the singleton design pattern. Like the V1, V2, V3, V5 also uses the lazy loading, but this is also thread safe. This V5 version is quite similar to V3 version, right? It is going to give you better performance, and it is also going to provide thread safety. Thread safety. Clear, guys?
Clear. Thank you.
Okay. Guys, give me 1 minute. Okay, so next what we are going to discuss, one of the interview question, right? So if you are attending any interview, then definitely you will face this question. What is the question? Even when I take the interview, I generally ask few questions related to static and what you can say singleton class, right? Because static and singleton classes are very frequently used in our project. So I generally ask this question. Why do we need to use the singleton class if a static class of the purpose? So whatever we are serving, we can serve the same thing using the singleton class, static class. Then what is the meaning of and when we need to use the singleton class? Or the question you can also ask in a different manner: what is the difference between singleton and static class in C#? When to use one over another in project development, right? So this question you might get in the interview if you are giving any interview, and if you are saying you know the singleton design pattern, right? So before proceeding and before discussing the differences between them, let us first saw what is the similarities between them. If someone asking this question means there is some similarity. Differences is definitely going to be there, but there are some similarities. And let us first see the similarities, then we'll see the differences. Right? Before proceeding, let us discuss the similarities between them. Both static and singleton classes can have only one instance available in memory. So if you are creating a static class, then only one instance of that class is going to be available. And even though in the case of a singleton class, right, if you implemented with thread safety, then also that singleton class having only one instance in the application. They both are used to holding the global state of an application, which is going to be common for all clients. I will explain these things with one with real-time example, right? The next what we are going to discuss two real-time example. One is exception logging, and one is what I can say caching, right? So basically both the singleton design pattern or the static members of a class, they are basically hold the global state, which is going to be same or common for all the clients. For both and going to do the same thing. Both static and singleton classes can be implemented as thread shape, right? So as you can see, static is by default thread shape, which is provided by CLR, and singleton classes, we can make them as thread shape. As you can see, apart from this V1 version, all other versions are thread shape. So we can implement both as a thread shape. So this is the similarities. Now let us proceed and see the differences, right? So before proceeding and seeing the differences, let me explain you one thing. Static is a language feature. You can see static means it's a keyword. Keyword means it's a language feature. Whereas singleton, it's a design pattern, right? So design pattern. So static is a language feature and singleton is a design pattern. That means they belongs to two different area. One is feature which is provided by .NET framework. Another is a design pattern which as a developer, we need to implement by following some rules and regulations. With this kept in mind, let us proceed and understand the difference between them. We cannot create an instance of a static class. Yes, one copy of the static class is available in memory, but as a developer, we cannot create an instance of a static class by using the new keyword, right? So this is not possible, right? One copy of the static class is available, but as a developer, we cannot create an instance using the new operator. But as a developer, we can create a single instance of a singleton class, and then we can reuse that singleton class, singleton instance at many different places. Here you can see we can create a single instance of a singleton class using the new operator, and that singleton instance can be reused by many clients at many different places. You can see that singleton instance used here, that singleton instance used here, right? So as a developer, we can create singleton instance only once. When the compiler compiles the static class, then internally it treats the static class as an abstract and sealed class. So the static class is abstract and sealed class. So as the static class is abstract, can we create the new keyword and create an instance of abstract class? Is that possible? Can you create an instance of an abstract class using the new keyword? Because I'm asking this question to you.
No, we
No.
cannot.
And if the class is sealed, then can we create a derived classes from this class?
No.
No.
No. So then, and while I'm mentioning the static class is abstract and sealed, I'm not saying it's by my word. It is saying by the compiler. It is saying by the .NET framework. To prove this, what we can do is, okay, go to your class program. So what I'm going to do, I'm creating a static class. So public static class, some class, right? I'm creating some static class, and within this some static class, public static integer x. I'm creating some variable x, right? So to prove this static class, what I'm creating a some class, it is a abstract and sealed class. What you need to do, just compile, build the application. Okay, application built successfully. Then go to the project explorer and see where uh, the DLL is generated. Copy the path, right? Once you copy the path, search for command prompt. See, developer command from Visual Studio 2017. I'm opening the Visual Studio command prompt, right? Once you open the command prompt, then type ILTASM, intermediate language disassembler, click on the OK button, then expand the file open and provide the path where the DLL is created. This is the DLL singleton demo. Open the DLL, right? Expand this section, and this is the sum class, right? Expand the section, and this is the sum class, right? So if you see what is it is saying, class public abstract, the class is abstract or not, and auto ANSI sealed, right? The class is abstract as well as sealed. So this is the compilation code. This is the code which is after we are getting after compilation, right? So that means whenever you create a class as static, then by default it is going to be abstract and sealed. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? That means as abstract and sealed, you cannot create an instance. See, I'm trying to create another class, public class, some class 2, right? I'm trying to inherit from some class. See, this is not possible. And here, I'm trying to inherit from the program class. See what happened? This is also not possible. So abstract class means you cannot make that class inheritance. So it is neither created as a parent class, nor it is created as a child class. This is not possible. Clear, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. On the other hand, we can create a singleton instance, single instance of the singleton class, as well as we can also use singleton class as a child class, right? So here I can show you, you can create an instance using this. Even if you want, then you can also make this class as a child class, right? Public class, I'm creating some class 1, right? And then if you want, then you can make this singleton class as a child class of this class, right? But you cannot make any further child classes of the singleton class. Why? Because this is marked as a cell. So this is also possible. So you can make this singleton class as a child class of any other classes. That is, inheritance is still possible, but further inheritances is not possible. You can make this class as a child class, but you cannot make this class as a parent class. What I mean to tell you, right? The singleton class constructor is always marked as private. We have already discussed. This is the reason why we cannot create an instance from outside of the singleton class. It provides either public static property or a public static method, whose job is to create the singleton instance only once and then return that singleton instance each time we call the public static property or method, right? So if you look at this, so this is the public method. The job of this public method is to create and return the singleton instance only once, no matter how many times from how many locations you are calling this method. It is going to create the singleton instance only one, and then it will reuse that singleton instance in many number of times. A singleton class can be lazily or can be loaded by CLR automatically. That means what? Now, that means if you are using singleton design pattern, then you have the option whether you want to load the singleton instance lazily, or you can load the singleton instance eager. That means both eager loading and lazy loading, both options are available with singleton design pattern. But with static class, there's no concept called lazy loading. Static class means only eager loading is possible. There's no way that you can that you will decide when I'm going to load the static class. Static class means it is going to be loaded automatically at the class start, right? But singleton, you have both the options. If you want, then you can load the singleton instance lazily, or you can also load the singleton or create the singleton instance eagerly like this, right? So then it is not possible to pass the static class as a method parameter, whereas we can pass the singleton instance as a method parameter. For example, okay, so let me create class, what I can say, static some class, some class. Getting the error. Okay. Static class na. Okay. Static class some class 1, right? So in this case, I'm creating another method here. Public static void some method, right? So and I'm creating another method, some method 2. So here I'm using singleton, SING, and here I want to make use of this sum class 1 as a parameter. Say this one. See, in this case, you can see in the sum method, singleton is accepting as a parameter. What is singleton? It's a singleton class, right? And in the second parameter, this is a static class. So we cannot use static class as a method parameter, but we can use the singleton class as a method parameter. And from here, right? So here you are getting the instance. Now you can call the sum method. So now from here, you can call the sum method, and to this method, you can pass this from student. So this is going to be accepted, right? But this is not possible. Even you cannot create this class as a method parameter, forget about the instance to be passed, right? So this is the point that what I'm mentioning. It is not possible to pass the static class as a method parameter, where we can pass the singleton instance as a method parameter. It is possible to implement interfaces inherit from other classes. I will discuss this. Already we have discussed this point, right? We can make the singleton class as a child class. That means that singleton class can implement interface, can also inherit from other classes. We'll also discuss some real-time example. At a time, I'm going to use this concept. It means singleton, it allows inheritance with the singleton class. The singleton class can be created as a child class also only. You cannot create child classes from the singleton class. These are not possible with static class. With static class, it is not possible to make the static class as a parent class, or it is not possible to create child classes from the static classes. That means what? Now with the singleton class, we are getting more flexible as compared to static classes. That means you cannot make the static class in inheritance, right? That means your flexibility is restricted. But with the singleton class, you can use you can implement interface, you can inherit from classes, you can use that singleton as a method parameter, right? These things are not possible with the static class. We can clone the singleton object, right? In our last session, we have discussed deep copy and shallow copy. So you can create one method which is going to create the deep copy and shallow copy of the singleton class. For example, this is my singleton class. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create public singleton, okay, clone method. And here I'm returning this dot member wise clone method. And here I'm converting this to singleton. So this is possible. The cloning is possible, but these things is not possible in a static class, right? So if I copy this, if I go to some static class, right? And if I'm trying to copy these things, right? This is not possible. This is not possible. Right? This is the point. The meaning of this point is that singleton means a single object across the application lifecycle. The scope is at the application level. The scope is at domain level. Okay, for the static class, the scope is at domain level. So what is application level for static class? Okay, what is application level? What is app domain? That we are going to discuss when we discuss the architecture of .NET Design Pattern. At that time, I will discuss what is GSE, what is CLR, what is CLS, what is common type CTS, right? How to create a global assembly case, right? How you can make a strong type DLL, what is weak type DLL. All these things we are going to discuss as part of our .NET framework architecture. But now you just remember the singleton class scope is application level and static class scope is up domain level. Clear, guys? Now, if someone asks you what is the difference between singleton design pattern, then you need to tell this. Clear? Guys?
Clear.
Okay. So next, what we are going to discuss, we are going to discuss some real-time examples of singleton design pattern. People are asking many times, sir, please explain the design pattern using some web application. So today I'm going to show you one web application, and I'm going to show you how you can use these things, right? So what is our requirement? We'll create one MVC application, and in that MVC application, we want to create a custom logger library using the singleton design pattern. So custom logger library using the singleton design pattern. What it means, now we will create a singleton custom logger library, and whenever any exception occurred in our application, in our MVC application, whenever there is some unhandled exception, right, then that exception information we need to log inside that custom logger library, right? So basically within the singleton design pattern, we will create one method. That method, you can give it any name. I'm going to give the name as log exception. And whenever there is some unhandled exception in our application, right, that exception information will be logged. uh, uh, Exception information we will pass into that log exception method, and as part of the log exception method we will write the logic where to log the data. So for this demo we'll log the data into a text file. Later, if you want to check what are the exception occurred in my application, you can simply open the text file that is going to be created day-wise, and then you can see what are the information is there, right? So for this demo, what we are going to do, we are going to use this database, like employee DB database. Within the employee DB database, we are going to use this employee table, right? And you can see there are a few records. So for that purpose, what I have done, I'm creating one database, right? So let me select the database employee DB, right? So in the employee DB database, I have created the employee. See, I have created one database called employee DB. I have used the employee DB. I have created the employee table, and then I have inserted the required information, right? Required data into the employee table. And now, if you verify the table, then you will see this data, right? What I'm showing in the picture. So our database is ready. Next, what we need to do, we need to create one MVC application. And that MVC application, I'm going to give the name as Singleton in MVC, right? So for that purpose, what I'm going to do is, okay, let me remove all these things. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new item, add new project. First of all, let me close all this. Add new project. So now I'm going with the web application .NET framework, providing the project name as Singleton in MVC. Clicking on the OK button. From this template, I'm selecting the MVC, and here I'm changing the authentication. So you can see different types of authentication. I'm going with the no authentication. Guys, remember, I'm not going to explain the MVC concept here. I'm going to use the Singleton design pattern MVC, because MVC itself a course, and that is not possible to explain the concept in this session, right? So simply I'm creating this MVC. It's a web application. You have to select the authentication as no authentication, then click on the OK button. So once you click on the OK button, it is going to create the one MVC application, right? Web application. Uh, and that application is going to be created with some default structure, right? Default structure means some default controller will be there, right? So you can see home controller, you can see route config file. If you see, this is the home controller index action method, this is the default route, and this is the home controller that is what created, right? So now what we need to do, we need to use our MVC design pattern, right, to communicate with this database, right? To communicate with this database, so select the what is the server name. This is my server name. So what we need to do is, within the models folder, we need to add entity data model, and we need to use entity framework database first approach to communicate with the database. For that purpose, right click on the models folder, right click, and select a new item. Once you select the new item, go to the data section. You can see on the left hand side, you will find data which is under Visual C#, which is under installed, right? Select the data, select the entity data model. give the data model any name. So I'm going to give this data model as employee data model. You can give any name. Click on the add button, right? Once you click on the add button, then you can see we have already discussed this thing in our entity framework session, right? So you have to select this option, entity EF designer from database. If you want to use database first approach, select this one, click on the next button, right? Once you click on the next button, then you need to click on the new connection, because I need to communicate with the database. In the server name, first of all, what kind of a database? It is SQL server. So you have to use the data source as a SQL client, right? Then you have to provide the server name. Once you provide the server name, you need to select the authentication type, using which authentication type you want to communicate to the database from your MVC application. I'm going with Windows authentication. Once you select the authentication, right, if you want to select the SQL Server authentication, then you need to provide the username and password. So I'm going with Windows authentication. Then you need to provide the database name. Right here in the drop-down list, you will see all the databases which are available inside this server. So which database we have created? We have created employee DB. Select the employee DB database, test the connection, whether connection is successful, means whatever the information you have provided, like the server name, data source, authentication type, everything is correct or not. Once you provide this, click on the OK button. And once you click on the OK button, then you can see this is creating. So say what we are going, I'm going to give the connection string name as employee DB context. Save connection string in web.config file. In the web config file, it will create the connection string with this name employee DB context. Further, it will also create the context class with this name employee DB context, right? So then click on the next button, select the entity framework version which you want to use. I want to use the latest version of entity framework, so I'm selecting entity framework 6.x. Then click on the next button. Once you click on the next button, it will show you the necessary tables, right, which you want to select from the database. Currently, I'm only having one table, so I'm selecting this employee. I want the models namespace to be models, right? So if you want, you can go with the default namespace. I'm changing the namespace and then simply click on the OK button. But while clicking on the finish button, if you are getting some kind of error, right, then what you need to do, you need to build the application or build the solution, right? So for now, let's wait whether we are getting the error or it is creating the model successfully. Still it is processing. Wait for some time, because whenever you are using entity framework and whenever you are creating the entity data model, right, it will take some time. Still it is processing. It should not take that much of time. Why it is taking more time? Okay. Perhaps my system is getting slow because I have not restarted from last 1 month. Okay, till it is processing. Okay, so our entity data model is created, right? So you can see this is the entity data model, and you can, okay, let me first make this a startup project, right? And here within the project, you can see models folder, and within the models folder, the EDMS file is created and the employee class is created. The context class is also created, right? So this is my context class, employee DB context, and this is my employee model. And if you go to the web config file, then you will see the connection string, right? The connection string name is employee DB context, right? So now we are communicate with the database, right? For our MVC application now communicating with the database. Once this is done, then what is next? Next, we are going to add a controller with the name employee controller. So simply how you need to add, right click on this controllers folder, add controller, right? So here I am going with this MVC5 controller with views using entity framework. What this option is going to do for me is it is going to create the necessary action method, necessary views, right, for the controller that what we are going to specify in the next screen, right? Simply click, select this MVC5 controller, views using entity framework, and click on the add button. So now you need to select this view, what you are going to create it is for which model class. So in our application, if you remember, it is going to create only one model class. What is the model class name? Employee. Select the model class. What is the data DB context class? So the for entity framework, you should know what is the model class. For entity framework, you should provide the context class name. And in this case, the context class name is DB context class. And then you need to give the controller name. So I'm going to give any name you want, but that should end with the word controller, right? I'm going to provide a controller name as employee controller and click on the rest. I'm keeping the checkboxes as it is and clicking on the add button, right? There was an error running a selected generator. So if you are getting this error, then what you need to do, just build the application, right? Once you build the application, build started, right? Build succeeded. Once you build the application, then do the same steps again. So add controller, MVC5 controller with views using entity framework, give the employee name, give the DB context class name, provide the controller name as employee. You can also keep the default name that is employees as it is. With these changes, right, once you click on the OK button, it will create the employee controller, and it will create the employee controller with the required action method to perform the CRUD operation on the employee model. And you can see this is the index method, which is going to show you the list of employees. This is the details method, right, which is going to show you the details of the employee, particular employee. This is great. You want to create a new employee, and on the post of the employee, right, whatever view will open once you click on the submit button, save button, this post version of the create method is going to be applied. This is the edit method get, this is edit method post, this is delete get, and this is delete confirm, right? And this is the dispose because it is dispose method, right? So this is the default code which is generated, and you can see it is making use of a DB context, right? So in this case, you can see it is fetching all the employees. In this case, whatever employee ID it received that employee information, right? So I'm not going into the details of this method because we are not learning MVC here, right? And for each action method, you can see corresponding view is there: index view, edit view, details view, delete view, and create view. And if you open the shared, you can see layout page is there, error.cs class file is also there. So our controller is ready, and what we want, to make this controller, right, employee controller index action method is the default action method. Right now, if you run the application, then you will see that the index action method of employee controller is going to be your landing page or the default page, right? If you have not specified anything in the route, then that default controller and default action method is going to be. Guys, give me 1 minute. Right? So you can say this is the things what is displaying right now. You can click on any of the employees, right, details. So I'm getting the employee information. Now, if I'm passing this 1001, and if I'm clicking on this OK button, I'm getting this error. So what is my intention? Now my intention is whenever some runtime error is occurred, and if that is not handled, then what we need to do, we need to log the error information into the log file. And for that purpose, we need to use exception logging. And we need to create the exception logging as a singleton class. Right now, let us proceed and see how we can implement this. Right. So first of all, what we need to do, we need to create a folder called a logger, right? So within that logger folder, I'm going to create the necessary classes for the singleton design pattern. So let me create a folder called logger. So within this logger folder, let me first create one interface ilog.cs. Right, this is the ilog.cs, and within this ilog.cs, what I'm going to do, okay, I'm copy pasting this code, right? This is the interface, right? This is the interface which is providing ilog, right? Next, what we need to do, we need to create a log.cs class file. This is going to be our singleton class, and inside this singleton class, what we are going to do, this singleton class is going to implement the ilog interface, and that singleton class needs to provide implementation for the log exception method, which we declared inside the ilog interface, right? Let me copy the code and then I will explain the code. See, so according to singleton design pattern, first of all, you need to make the class as the class constructor as private. Yes, we are making this class constructor as private. Second thing, we need to declare a public static variable which is going to store and return the singleton instance. Yes, we are making this, and here we are using the eager loading concept, right? Log.instance new log means it is nothing but your eager loading, right? Eager loading means we will not get any kind of threads issue, right? If we are running the application in a multi-threaded environment. And this, we need to provide one public static method or public static property, which is going to return the singleton instance. And in this case, it is our static method. And as this class implement the ilog interface, and inside this ilog interface, we are having that log exception class. So what we need to do, we need to implement that log exception class. How we are implementing the log exception class? So this is the file name. The file name is nothing but your datetime.now.to sort date string. So it will convert your current date time to the format to sort date string, and then it is going to create the file as a .log file. It is going to create the file as a text file. This is the file name. You can give any name to your file, and this is the log path. Log path means where the file is going to be created. So in this case, up current directory dot base directory, in the sense this file is going to be created here, right? So here in this folder, the file is going to be created. If you want, you can change the directory. You can give a specific directory where you want to create the file, right? Then what I'm going to do to store this message, I'm using the string builder, because every time some issue is there, I need to append the string again and again. See, for that purpose, it is better to use string builder rather than string. And we have already discussed this thing in our starting classes, right? When we discussed the string concept, right? So I'm creating an instance of string builder, appending a line for each exception message. This line is going to be created, and then I'm appending this datetime.now.string at what time the exception is created, and then I'm calling this, and then I'm appending the message information, right? What exception it's thrown, that exception information, right? And then I'm using the stream writer object, and to this stream writer object, I'm passing this log file path. I'm passing the value as true. If you go to the definition of this class, then you can see append. Append means to this path, whatever message I'm sending, that I need to append, right? So in this case, it is appending, right? True. And then I'm just calling this writer.write method, and whatever message that message I'm passing, and I'm making this writer as false, so that the buffer is going to clear. Again, a new message will come. That new message is going to write inside this path, right? What path you have provided? Inside this path. Inside that path, what is the file name? This is the file name. Inside this file name, inside this path, whatever message we are sending, that is going to be written, right? And for that purpose, we are using the stream writer. So in our upcoming session, when we discuss file handling, at that time, I will discuss many different classes which are basically used to perform file handling, right? For now, I'm not going to give more focus on this stream writer, stream reader, what is this write method, plus method. I'm not going to give more focus on this, right? So our log exception class is ready. Now, what is our requirement? Our requirement is whenever some exception occurred, we need to log that exception information. For now, if you see, if the employee is null, so it is returning HTTP not found exception. instead of this, what I want to do, if the employee, so for the employee information which you want to find, that employee information is not found, then what I need to do, I need to throw one new exception, right? And what message I'm going to give? I'm going to give this employee with ID, whatever ID you pass is not found in the database. So this is the message what I'm passing through, right? So that is fine. But the thing is that how we can use the exception logger. We have created the exception logger, but how we can use the exception logger, right? For that purpose, we are going to use the on exception method, right? We are going to use the on exception method, right? So let me bring the namespace where the ilogger is defined. So ilog is defined. So privately, I have created a private variable. This is the DB context class. And using the employee class constructor, we are initializing this logger.log instance. That means whenever any action method is executed, before that the constructor is executed. Once the constructor is executed, this ilog variable is initialized. And once the ilog variable is initialized, right? And here we are using the on exception method. If you remember, if you are having some basic knowledge of exception handling in MVC application, whenever there is an on handle exception on a controller, right, action method, then the on exception method is going to be fired, right? In this case, you can see we are throwing some exception and we are not handling that exception. There is no try catch block. That means this is one on-handled exception. And whenever there is an on-handled exception, the on exception method is going to be executed. And inside this on exception method, what we are doing, so whatever the exception that we are converting that to toString, and we are just calling that log exception method. That means we are logging the exception information. And what this log exception method will do, right? Okay, that method will do all these things, right? Whatever the exception we are sending, that exception it will log into this file which is available inside this file, right? And once the exception is logged, then we need to set that exception is handled by making this value as true, and then we need to redirect the user to the error view. And if you remember, within the shared folder we are having a view, right? Where is the shared folder? Views, shared, you can see error.cs, right? So we are just navigating the user to the error view. With these changes, right, now run the application. Right, we are getting this employee details 1005, that is fine. But what I'm going to do, I'm sending 1002. Now in the database, this employee information is not available. See what happens? An error occurred while processing your request, right? If you open the error view, then you will see that this message what we are sending, this is processing, right? An error occurred. But now go to the directory. So you can see this is the log file exception by 22.3. This file is generated, right? Open this file, open with notepad and see the details, right? So employee with ID 100 is not found in the database, and this is the exception information, right? So now, right now, any controller, any action method within this controller, any exception occurred, if that exception is not handled, then this on exception method is going to be executed. And for that purpose, we need to create an instance. So now the instance is not going to be created again and again. Once the instance is created, we can reuse that instance. And again, this things is not limited to this employee controller. You in your application, you can have many number of controller, right? In each controller, if you want, then you can implement this logic. And this time, this instance is not going to be created again and again, only one instance, and that instance is going to be reused by all the controllers. And that method, what you are calling that method, is going to be used by that singleton instance. So this is how you need to use singleton design pattern in your MVC application to log the exception. Clear, guys?
Clear. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So The next, I'm going to show you another real-time example of singleton design pattern, right? So how you can implement caching using singleton design pattern. Let me show you. So this time I'm not going to use MVC application. I'm going to simply use what I can say a console application, because the thing is that in this application, which one is our singleton design pattern? This thing. This is the important application. Other things are related to MVC only. This is the thing which is implement the singleton design part, right? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to implement caching. Okay, let me add another project into this solution. Right, let me add another project into this solution. This time it is going to be a C console application class library, not console application dot net. Singleton design pattern real time example, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to provide the caching functionality. Caching functionality means what? Now different client can use the singleton design button to add an element in the form of a key value pair into the cache. They can paste the element from the cache by using the key. They can also update the existing key with a new value. They can delete a particular key from the cache, and it is also possible we need to provide some kind of mechanism to delete all the elements from the cache. So basically, if you are having some kind of caching experience, right? If you are using Redis cache, Memcache, right? All these kind of things, then these are the functionality they generally provide. They are providing the functionality to add element into the cache. Whenever we are adding the element, that element having some key value, key. Using that key, you can paste the element. Using that key, you can update the value, right? And using that key, you can remove the element from the cache. And it is also possible we need to provide some kind of mechanism to delete all the element from the cache. Right, now let us proceed and see how we can implement this by using singleton design pattern. So let me first create one class file with the name imycache.cs. Right, so let's make this as the startup project. So I'm creating this class file interface imycache.cs. This is the interface, and as part of the interface, we need to declare the operations, right, which are generally required for caching, right? So here we can see imycache add functionality, and as you know, I'm going to work with different types of values. Sometimes we need to store string value, sometimes we need to store integer value, sometimes we need to store a complex object, sometimes we need to store a collection of data, right? And we know the key sometimes might be a string, sometimes might be an integer, right? So based on these things, what we have decided, so if you want, then you can make this key as string value, that is fine, right? But I'm making this as an object to make sure that you can store the data, you can store the key as a string, or you can store the key as a integer value like this. But most of the time you will see the key is going to be a string. So instead of object, you can also make this as key as a string, right? And the value, I'm making the data type as object. Why? Because I'm going to store different kind of value. I'm going to store integer value, string value, employee data, different kind of data, some collection, some uh, uh, some collection type of value, right? So I'm making an object. Why? Because object is the super class in .NET, and a object, if you are making the data type as object, that means you can store any type of data. Yes, boxing unboxing is required, but you can store any type of data, and this is mandatory. Why? Because we cannot give guarantee that we are always going to store the string type of values in the cache. Sometimes we need to create store one employee object. Sometimes we need to store some JSON object, right? So for that purpose, I'm making this as object. See, this add method, while calling the add method, we need to pass the key and value. And once the key is added into the cache, we need to return false. Add update means it is going to add the key if it is not already available in the cache. If it is available, then it is going to update the value of that key. Get method means it is going to return the value based on the given key. Remove means it is going to remove the what I can say, it is going to remove the key from the cache. And further, in this case, if the key what you are passing, if that key is not exist in the cache, in that case, it is going to return me null. And as we know, we can return any type of value. So the return type is going to be object. In this case, if add is successful, then it is going to return true. But guys, remember, if you are using this add method and if you are passing the key, if the key is already added, then in that case, it will not add the key again. In that case, it will return false. In this case, if the key is already available, then it will update the value. If not available, then it is going to add the value. In that case, it is going to return. In this case, get method, whatever the value return, that is going to be returned. Remove means you are passing the key. If that key is available, then it will remove the key and it will return true. If the key is not available in the cache, then it will simply return false. And clear method means whatever the key value you have added into the cache, everything is going to be cleared from the cache. This is the use of this clear method. So this is the functionality that you generally found in a caching application, right? Now, next, what we need to do? Next, we need to create the singleton cache class, right? Singleton class. And this singleton class is going to implement this myCache interface and needs to provide implementation for all these 5 methods. Let me create the class and then let me copy paste the code, right? Right. So for this purpose, what I'm using this concurrent dictionary as my cache. So if you remember, what is the difference between a dictionary and a concurrent dictionary? Can anybody tell me? We have already discussed these things. Dictionary is not thread safe, whereas concurrent dictionary is thread safe, right? If you are using concurrent dictionary and if you are trying to add 2 key with the same name at the same time, then the thread safety will be taken care by the CLR automatically for us. That means with concurrent dictionary, we do not find any kind of a thread safety issues, right? But with dictionary, you will find a thread safety issue. And this is the variable where we are going to store the key value data. And here you can see the key is of type of object and the value is also type of a object, right? And this is my singleton instance, right? I'm using eager loading to create the instance, right? That means at the time of class startup, the instance is created and ready to be used by the client, right? And here you can see whenever the client calls this get instance method, we are going to return the already created singleton instance, right? And this is the private constructor. That means once you call the singleton instance for the first time, it is going to create the instance, and that instance, this constructor is going to be executed. And you will see that no matter how many number of times you call this get instance method, only one instance available, right? And this is the add method. The add method means this is the thread set because you are using the concurrent dictionary. Concurrent dictionary dot try add method. So what is concurrent dictionary? This is my concurrent dictionary object. And to this concurrent dictionary object, I'm passing this try add, whatever the key I'm receiving and whatever the value I'm receiving, and that is what I'm passing. If you go to the definition of this method, right, then you will see that attempts to add the specified key value to the system.concurrent dictionary. And in this case, what is the key? The key of the element. What is the value? The value of the element to add. And in this case, it will return true if the key value pair was added, false if the key is already exist, right? So in this case, if the key is already exist, it will return false. And if the key is not exist, then it will add this key value pair the cache. So this concurrent dictionary you can consider as the cache memory, right? Add update means in this case, what we need to do, right? What is our requirement? This add update functionality is basically used if the key is already added, we need to update the value. If the key is not added, then we need to add the key. So in this case, first of all, we need to check whether the key is available or not. If the key is available, then remove that key and again add that key to the collection, right? Simply in this case, this will make sure that the latest key what you are passing, that is going to be used. This is the get method, whatever the key that you need to pass, and if the key is exist, then you need to return the value. And if the key is not exist, means the concurrent dictionary does not contain this key, in that case, we need to return the null value. Remove means again, you need to pass the key. And in this case, we are trying to remove the key from the collection, right? If this key is available inside this concurrent dictionary, then it will remove the key and it will return true. And that is what we are returning. And that removed object is going to be stored inside this out variable for further use if you want to know what value it is removed. and what is the associated value of this particular key. If you want, then you can also use that value, right? And this clear method means it is going to clear the concurrent dictionary. That means all the elements is going to be cleared, right? So this is what this method is all about. Now we need to use the cache in our application. So let me close all these files which are not required. Right. So this is my program class. I have done this, right? Let me minimize this one. So first of all, you need to get the singleton instance, singleton dot get instance. So let me in this case one. So using this cache, I'm adding some key value into the cache memory, adding ID in cache. So what you need to do, you need to call the add method on the cache object, and you need to provide the ID. This is the key and this is the value. Adding name in cache, cache dot add. Here the key is name, the value is product. Adding same ID key in the cache using the add method, right? Already this ID key is added, and again I'm trying to add this ID and I'm providing a different value using the add method. And again, I'm adding the same ID key in cache using the add object method. So the point that you need to remember, this ID is added with this value. And in this case, as you are using the add method, the ID is already added. So it is going to return false. It is not going to return true. So in this case, what it is going to return? It is going to return true. The key is added. It is going to return true. The key is added. So in this case, is the key is going to be added? No, it is not going to be added. So in this case, it is going to return me false. And adder object means it is going to update the key, that ID key with the new value. So in this case, you will see the data, it is going to return. So we have, once you add, right, you can use the same singleton instance, or you can create a different instance, right? Sometimes you add the keys from one location and you want to fetch the keys from a different location, right? So now we are trying to fetch the values from the caches, right? So you can see I'm creating a different cache object, singleton cache. But if you see, this is not going to return me a different object. The same cache object it is going to return, using which you have added the element, that cache is going to be returned. So case one dot ID. So in this case, whatever value will return, the latest or updated value. What value is there? 2001. This is what it is going to return. And from the cache one dot name, what name is there? From this value, it is going to return. So this is how you will fetch the data from the cache, right? Removing elements from cache using the remove method, right? So cache dot remove ID, right? Remove ID. So if you want to remove the ID, then you need to pass the ID value. And if it is successfully removed, then it will return you true, that ID is removed. And once you remove the ID value, and again, if you want to access the ID, then what value you will get? You will not get anything. You will get null. Null means it will not print anything on the output, right? And this clear method means all the elements is going to be deleted. And once you call this clear method, try to access this name, and again you will get null, means it is not going to print anything on the, now what I can say, on the screen, right? Let me run the application and show you the output. Okay. So adding ID in cache true, adding as name in cache true, adding same ID in cache using add method false, adding same ID key in cache using adder update method true, fetching the ID, the latest ID 2001 we have added, that is fetched, fetching name from removing value from the cache, remove ID true, ID remove, then accessing ID from the cache, and already you have removed, then you will not get any value. Clearing all keys and values, fetching name. Once you clear, then if you try to fetch any value, then you will not get the data. This is how you need to implement caching using singleton. Any question from anyone related to this example or today's session?
No, sir.
Clear, guys?
No, I'm good. No, sir. Clear.
Okay. Okay, fine. So, guys, one request from my side, I'm saying that please give some comment on the video on my YouTube channel, but I can see only 2-3 people are giving comment. right? Please try to keep 2-3 minutes and try to keep some valuable comment, right? Because as soon as so what is my intention? I want to reach more and more people, right? People not like the people who joined in today's session, people like who really want the this kind of thing, right? That's it. Tomorrow we are going to discuss abstract factory design pattern with real-time example. Thank you guys.